So tonight, we have the opportunity to explore the Enneagram, which can help your personal and professional life. It can help you better understand thinking patterns, behaviors, increase your awareness and emotional intelligence. And tonight, leading us in this talk is Megan Knight and Lou, here I go, Monticchio. A little bit about, did it okay? A little bit about Megan. Her spiritual journey began early on and developed mostly during high school. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Montclair and has continued her education in many ways. She is passionate about the Enneagram, loves helping people create meaning out of suffering, end-of-life topics, and bringing an awareness that we are interconnected. Megan began her journey toward a deep understanding in the Enneagram while working for a hospice team. Lou is a board-certified clinical chaplain with the College of Pastoral Supervision and Psychotherapy. And recently, he also has been providing pastoral support to hospice patients and families for the Visiting Nurse Health Group. Lou is currently involved in assisting secular and faith communities in exploring ways to deepen knowledge and compassion of ourselves, each other, and the earth. He has found that the Enneagram is an effective tool in these aspirations. And so Megan and Lou will help us tonight understand a little bit more about what makes us tick and how we can care for each other in a better way. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Take a moment to share and get our presentation.
They're doing
it. So welcome. Glad to be with you. Megan and I are both glad to be with you this evening. So as Pat just mentioned, Megan and I actually met in the hospice agency that we had talked about, we had mentioned earlier. And I just want to say that one of the reasons we got involved in the Enneagram while we were in hospice was, and for those that are in any kind of healthcare clinical work, it might not be a surprise to realize that hospice is a very stressful healthcare offering, and there's a lot of pressures, budgetary pressures and logistical pressures that just come with the nature, because we're dealing with terminal disease and guiding people through end of life in that journey. What we found was personality friction. I don't know if anybody's experienced that in life. Can really exacerbate the stressors that exist that we really can't control too much, but the personality friction and just interactions between clinical staffs, members could really impact our ability to do that work effectively. So that's where we got involved in looking at the Enneagram being a tool to bring some insight as to what these personality differences are that we all have. There's a positive aspect to them, and at times there's an element that can be misunderstood as we try to interact with each other. And what we were aiming for was to bring some insight into the hospice world among the clinical staff, and that was part of our motivation. So we're hopefully going to share some of that tonight and give you an opportunity to see how that might apply to your own lives. So we thought a good place to start would just be a slide just on background of where does the Enneagram come from? Where did it originate? And it's kind of a bit of an interesting mix of ancient history and more contemporary, psychological knowledge, and in the more modern era. And so that's kind of fascinating. We got the merger of both the ancient and the contemporary. Some of the symbols that you're going to see that we use go back quite a bit, probably to the time of Pythagoras, and when symbols were used to try and affect some understandings of what was going on in life. So where we do find traces of the early elements of what you're going to see in ancient Christian mystical writings, also in Hebrew mysticism and Islamic Sufism. So some of the early roots, are you can find traces of them in these particular faith traditions. But then the way it made its way into the West, we have a couple of individuals who were credited with bringing it. George Gurdjieff is a Russian-Romanian gentleman, philosopher, mystic, spiritual teacher, who was doing some research in that area and came upon some of this ancient teaching and wisdom, and was incorporating and bringing that into the Western European space. Then we see a Chilean philosopher, Oscar Ixo, who basically is taking some of what he sees from Gurdjieff's writings and synthesizing that into the elements of personality and what you're going to see as these centers of intelligence. Around the same time frame, because we're in the 20th century, there's a psychiatrist, also Chilean, Claudio Naranjo, who actually, coming from a more psychological perspective and a psychiatric background, is layering more modern personality theory and ego fixation frames around the instrument. So that's where you have this merger of ancient and contemporary. Don Rizzo was a Jesuit. Russ Hudson knew Don, and this Claudio brought it into the California Berkeley area and was holding classes, and that's when it started spreading into the U.S. In particular. And I know the Jesuits were one particular community that was using it for in spiritual direction as well. So that's a little bit of a background where it comes from.
So we'll talk about the goals of what to expect for the workshop. Thank you, Lou, for a great overview of the history. We're hoping that you leave with a broad understanding of the system, understanding the three centers of intelligence and some of each type's characteristics. It's a lot of information, so we don't expect you to know it all. But the purpose is really for self-identification and to, listen to the description of each type and being able to be, like a self-observer of your behavior and how you interact with those around you. But I think more importantly, that's how the personality is, how you interact with each other. But really it's about what's going on inside of you that really causes or, models your behavior. So the objective is to not over-identify with a specific type or set of types, but to kind of listen and maybe jot down, if you have some, paper with you, if you identify with a type that we're talking about, maybe jot down that number. We're not going to be doing any identification in this workshop, but we're really just going through the centers of intelligence and then each types, so you can go ahead and maybe do a little more investigating on your own. And really the only person that can figure out your type is yourself with the help of a coach. So we will go through, these are the centers of intelligence. You can see that the diagram or the shape that we'll be using is a 9-pointed, we call circle. It's all grouped by 3 centers of intelligence. The first group is 8, 9, and 1, and that's the acting center of intelligence. The next group is the feelings, and the third group is thinking. So Lou is going to go into the feeling center to start.
Yeah, and the reason, let me just add, thanks Megan for the dive in. The reason I think trying to get a sense of where your type is, where a person's orientation to particular type is, because that's kind of the entry point into the Enneagram, and you know it well because it's your own personal space. So that's why we invite people to try and, as Megan did, try and find what connects with you, where you see yourself in this particular model. So starting with the feeling center. So I'll self-disclose. I'm in this tribe. There's 3 tribes. The feeling center is one of the first ones. We use a heart to symbolize it because emotion tends to be a big play for us. We filter reality through our sense of emotional, like, you talk about people have high emotional intelligence. This is the group we're talking about. And a big part of what drives us and motivates us is trying to get others to seek their appreciation, affirmation, acknowledgement, recognition. Very important drivers for how we engage the world. And so in order to do that, you're going to see these 3 types. They're all in the feeling center. And I'm going to tell you, the first one's called the helper, type 2, and then the achiever, and then the artistic expression. Each one of those types, although they're different, and we're going to go through each one, they're all trying to create an image and project an image into the world so that they can seek recognition, and that seems to be an important driver for them. But the strengths that we put forth in this tribe, very empathetic people, or ability to understand what's occurring in a situation, in an interaction, and putting forth compassion and loving kindness. When we're on our A game, these pour forth. So the first one is the helper, and that's the space I operate. That's the type I'm drawn to. I just want to put this slide up because it's a bit of a collage, but just take a little bit of seconds just to kind of just absorb it, because this is the mosaic of what makes a 2, called the helper. Caring, trying to care for others, meet others' needs, the natural givers, in the world. All right. So if we just put a little bit more definition around that, these are people that are generous. They people pleasers. They, the folks that if they entered into a room and they saw someone by themselves, they would be the first one, maybe go up and introduce themselves and try to engage in conversation because they don't want anyone to feel isolated or lonely, right? The fear, a basic fear that drives them, is a sense of being unwanted or unworthy. And some of all this kind of operates probably from a very early age when we were young. We all had to figure out how to navigate life when we were just starting out as children. And based on the circumstances in our lives and in our family systems, in this case, this became a way for me to navigate those waters, to try and find my way and helping in whatever way. I was the oldest of 5. So this strong desires to feel loved and you want to basically be appreciated. So part of the drive is to help people meet their needs, even if it means giving up some of my own, because the drive is that important, because I feel if I meet someone else's needs, I'll gain some appreciation. And that's a bit of the Achilles heel. So as much as we have this genuine want to help others, what we have to be careful, what I have to be careful, I can speak personally, is if I find myself doing it to gain appreciation, so then that becomes a little bit of an ulterior motive, a little bit of an ego motive, and that could turn into some shadow stuff elements where if I don't get the appreciation, if that's part of what I was looking for and it doesn't get met, that could create some tension. So it's important, I think, as I see those emerging, to take a close look at what is happening in the situation, in the interaction. But I could tell you, when a 2 is operating out of selfless love, it becomes very authentic, and that's the beauty of trying to clear away the baggage that could get in the way of expressing that genuine caring and wanting to help. There's a tremendous sense of humility if you're operating out of a strong space there. So let me move on now to, that was the 2, the helper. The next in this triad of the feeling center is what we call the achiever. And here's a little mosaic of what the characteristics of the achiever, right? Wanting to impress people with their achievements, successes, stories of success. These are the folks that will match, communicate to whatever audience, whatever they believe you would need to hear for you to be impressed with them, and they would just love to tell you about it. So these are driven folks, driven to succeed, and want to have that image be the image that is valued in the world as they interact, and they do achieve a great deal and are very, very successful in their endeavors many times. So just to put a little more frame around that, again, there's a fear of worthlessness, you know. So there's also this need to feel valued and worthwhile. But you know, as the 2 is focusing on helping meet someone's needs, they're basically trying to achieve a lot in life, to be that success-oriented person, and people will look up to them and appreciate them for what they're accomplishing. So they're driven and motivated by that, and that can accomplish a great deal of good in the world, for themselves, for others around them. If you think about a workplace setting where, you know, these are the people that are really, really making things happen because they're driven. Now the shadow or is they got to be careful, because they can just become a workaholic, because there's no boundaries around what they're achieving, and then there's also a sense that they could, because they're trying to present this image of success to different groups, they could put on various masks of, you know, depending on who they're trying to impress, and they can get a little bit lost in that. So that's something to be aware of for them. But again, when they're operating on their A game, tremendously you know, charming people, and success focused on accomplishing you know, the objectives that are in front of them, for themselves and for the group that they're working with. And then the third in this triad is number 4, and this is the group that call them like a romantic, sometimes an artistic individual. They are operating, and you could see some of these, you know, self-expression, identity. You know, there's a certain depth to them, a tremendous amount of creativity. They like to be their own person, and so that's what's very, because they feel if they could just be their own unique person, that will be appreciated by others. And so you have very expressive. These are a lot of your folks that are in the creative space, where they can, whether it's music, art, they have this ability to really focus their energies on their inward creative talents, and can apply those. And so they don't want to be a conformist. They really are motivated by creating their own sense of who they are, and they're very much in touch with their mood, their feelings, their sense of inner kind of the inner rhythms that are operating inside of them, And so, and you know, and they hope and they strive as they do this, as they're trying to be authentic for who they are, that it's appreciated and valued by those around them. And so, so you get some great creative talent coming out of this motivation. And the thing that we have to just be aware of, or four would have to be aware of also, is if they're not getting that level of recognition, they could get into a bit of a funk because it's not working for them, and so that's something that and become envious of others and what's happening around them. So again, on their A game, you get a lot of great creativity and great uniqueness and individuality. So there's a real authenticity to what they bring up for those around them and who they're working with. So that's the feeling center, and now we're going to switch to a very different center, and Megan is going to lead us through that.
Thank you, Lou. So the Thinking Center, I happen to be a member of this tribe myself. So I am always in my head. We are numbers 5, 6, and 7 on the Enneagram. Everything that we process externally gets processed through our thoughts, not necessarily our emotions or our feelings. We like to think a lot. We may not act on what we're thinking, but everything that happens, all of our energy is really in this space, in our head space. Likes to have good idea what to expect before entering a new situation. Some of our types are more prone to that than others. We'll go through those with you. Because the Thinking Center is also a fear-based center, a lot of our thinking has to do with working through our anxiety. So we go through all kinds of thought processes, different scenarios, analyzing data to know what to expect for the outcome, or at least if we don't know the outcome, we can prepare for every given scenario that can help us know what to expect, so we're not unprepared. Some of our best qualities is because we are, like all about data and thoughts and processes. We have this wisdom, knowing, intuition, and thoughtfulness. We will start with the type 5, which is called the Investigator. The Investigator is the quintessential subject matter expert. This person does not open their mouth at a party or social gathering unless they feel very comfortable with what the subject matter is, and that they'll be respected for their knowledge of the subject matter. You can see by some of these words and images on the slide, they are interested in the truth. They have this drive in them for deep investigation. Again, they have to be subject matter experts. They're really good at connecting information and making connections to a larger reality. They prefer to observe things rather than maybe, first party interaction. So they'll be like kind of at a party, and they'll be around the outskirts of the room, just observing everyone and collecting information on everyone. This person, because they're always like at this high tune frequency of observing, they would notice I don't know how many forks are out at the table, and then seeing if they match the plates, that kind of thing. That's how observant they are. Some of their struggles is that because they're so involved in their thoughts and the information gathering, they can sometimes be detached and withdrawn. They don't like to identify with their feelings per se. And so they kind of have to trust their feelings more so than, I would probably say any other type. They compartmentalize feelings rather than actually experiencing them. So we can go into the next slide. You can see here the type as a brief explanation, alert, insightful, curious. They have the ability to really concentrate and focus on complex ideas and skills. They definitely like their alone time. They can come across as an introvert, where they actually feel like they can only allot a certain amount of their social energy to a situation in terms of like hours or days even, but they have to be prepared for that in advance. They have to know what to expect. Their basic fear, the reason that they are so driven to accumulate knowledge, is that they fear being useless, helpless, or incapable. So on the flip side, their desire is to be capable and competent. So in order to counter that fear, they accumulate knowledge to be these subject matter experts. I just want to note on these slides that we are not going through, you can see the image in the upper right-hand corner. Each type goes into a different area of growth and disintegration. So you'll see like the growth and stress. So we're not going to go into those diagrams during this workshop, but that's basically how we all behave. Like for any given type, we are primarily. We're also related to at least 2 other types. And then there's also, a total of maybe even 5 types that we kind of like float around the Enneagram with. So I just wanted to note that we're not ignoring it. We're just not going to have time to get into that tonight. So the next slide is a type 6. A type 6 is a loyalist. The loyalist is pretty funny. They're also in their heads. They are really good at taking in data and preparing for every single scenario that could either go wrong or right. They're always prepared. They have they can have a distrust in authority, but really what their distrust in authority is their distrust in their own authority or their own personal power. They are also in this thinking center, which means that they're a fear-based type. So 6s have a lot of anxiety. So they use their mental power to work through that. But they are extremely good friends. They're excellent to be on a team with because they kind of poke holes in all the scenarios. So you can, expect the unexpected type of thing. And then they're also loyal to the point where they'll go down with the ship, even if the ship isn't deserving to have them stay on it. So the next slide is, let's go through the fear. So they fear of being without support and guidance, and their basic desire is to have security and support. So again, working through that anxiety, that underlying fear, is really because they long for a sense of security and support from their external world. So we can see in brief, they're committed, they're security oriented, they're reliable, they're hardworking, they are excellent troubleshooters, they foresee problems. I have a number of 6s in my life. What this slide doesn't show is what I would call free floating hostility. They have the ability to like be really funny, but like it's almost at your expense. So if you know anyone like that, you're like, oh my God, we're all laughing together and ha ha. And you're like, wait, was that at me? Like, did I just get attacked? That's kind of a free floating hostility, which is again based in that fear-based operating, not procedure, but mode. So again, they're stable, they're loyal, they'll go down with the ship. They're great teammates to have, as are all types. It's just about knowing, what their positive attributes are and what they struggle with as well. So type 7 is our next head center type. And so again, to self-disclose, I am a 7. So we love freedom, we love planning, we love having fun. We are also constantly thinking, I have trouble even doing meditations because my brain is constantly moving and going and thinking about really the future. We're future oriented, so we're always making plans for the future, so we have something to look forward to. The challenge for a 7 is staying in the present moment and also sitting with feelings. So out of all the types on the Enneagram, the 7 is probably the least in touch with feelings and emotions. Similar to a 5 and a 6, we can compartmentalize really well. So we know what feelings look like. We can identify them with other people, but we don't necessarily sit in them ourselves. Lou, you can go to the next slide. So 7s are very busy. I couldn't even tell you a day in the life of me. I think I would exhaust people. We love spontaneity. We love versatility. We can often be scattered, but we're also, because we're those, head-centered data processors, we're also able to gather information together, synthesize it, and then come out with an output of, maybe something new or something that, not everyone has thought of. So we also are creative, but in a different way, like in a doing way, not necessarily a creating way like a 4 would be, which would be like manifesting their creativity in art or music or, another creative space. Our basic fear is being deprived and in pain. That deprivation, I would say, is most related to scarcity. So 7s can have issues with scarcity or feeling that they don't have enough, which means that we overdo everything. So I think my mantra, if I had to be honest with myself, would be there's really never enough of anything good. Obviously, there's enough bad things, but there's never enough good things. Our basic desire is to be satisfied and content. And as we learn more about this, and maybe you do some self exploration, you can figure that all of these fears and desires kind of trip ourselves up in life. So when you're going through all of these types, like Lou said in the beginning, I think it's best to just do maybe an identification with your center of intelligence to get you a grouping of types, and then narrow it down further. So our last triad is our instinctual or acting center, which Lou is going to talk about.
Thanks, Megan. So this is the last triad, and this is kind of think of these are folks. The first one was operating out of their emotional heart center. Megan just talked about the head, right? Thinking through what's happening around them. This is a group, a tribe that's operating out of instinctually their body. They're feeling it in their body. And if the environment they're operating in is not where they're comfortable with it, one of the things that could emerge is a frustration with that, and almost like an anger, and then a motivation to want to control that and get that environment where it needs to be, so that they can maintain some stability for themselves. So what's important, I just want to say before we delve into this, these centers are important, and then even the type within the center. But the center is very important because, as you can see already, if you're interacting, if you have a spouse or partner or a close coworker who's operating out of a different center than you, their core need is very different than your core need. And that could explain if there's times where it's just not, you're not connecting. It could be because there's a mismatch. We're not being attentive to these specific needs that each person has. So that's why that's a value point in what we're offering here. So now as we delve into the acting center, this is a group you're going to see, and they manifest it. These 3 types manifest their need to control the environment in different ways, but it's all about putting some effort and energy and managing that environment to affect a stability that they're looking for. So let's delve into the first one, and that is the 8. And the 8 is a pretty intense. If you've ever around a take charge person who steps into an environment or a group of people and quickly tries to assert control and influence, typically if you've met an individual that has that kind of energy, you know it. It's not subtle. So And they're really trying to, for their own sense of stability, is influence that environment. And so so that's why, you know, sometimes it can come across in very like an aggressive way or an aggressive stance, but they're not afraid to step forward and take control, and that's, many times that's needed, and very important. So that's a little collage of what an eight, characteristics of an eight. If we get a little more flesh around that: self-confident, strong, straight talking, don't like a lot of BS, and they're afraid of either they're being harmed or people they care about are being harmed. So they're gonna take a very assertive action to control and minimize that any kind of negative, what they perceive as negative influence around them. Okay, so it's a protective, drive, and they're very strong, self-reliant. The the thing they don't appreciate is an element of weakness. It doesn't process well in their DNA. So and they can get very frustrated with that. So these are folks that could come across, as sometimes the label bullying. Especially if they're operating in a stress setting, they can overdo it and not even realize it, because it's kind of their skin. So if they can, so it's good, again, if you're in this space, it's good to have some barometers or ways of seeing if you're overdoing it, because then you could dial it back a little bit and be a little more effective in your interactions with others. So that's the 8. Okay, now we'll move to the 9, person referred to in some ways as the peacemaker. A person in this tribe of kind of body gut, who is really trying to control the environment around them by minimizing stressors. So this is a person who, I don't know if you've ever seen anyone who can just see all sides, right? So they're a way they can manage conflict by connecting with different points of view, and where people are arguing, they could see both sides, and the thrust is they're really trying to reconcile, dial it down, and to be a mediator to minimize the conflict that could be occurring in the environment. So that could be a very, very important, especially in today's world, with the stressors that are going on. Very important gift that can occur, that these folks can offer, just in their normal way of being. So there is this desire for an inner stability, peace of mind. So they want to create this harmony in the environment, and so they will do what they can. So these are, they're very trusting. They're very, they can. If you were in an environment where people are having, differences of opinion, and it's leading to some argumentation, they'd be the folks that could listen to both sides and really, and when you're talking to a 9, you feel like you're genuinely being listened to, because you are, and so and they don't really need to take control or assert themselves. So that's so it's a little bit easy to, versus the 8 who's trying to take control. They're managing the environment by kind of helping to take the temperature down. So that's really good. The thing they have to watch out for is that, if you're basically going along with what everyone else is doing to maintain stability, you could lose what your needs are, right? And they don't get expressed effectively. And so there's just something to be aware of with the 9, that they could just get very comfortable with that kind of calm stability, and not be able to express what their real need is there. So that's the 9. Now the last one in this tribe is referred to as the 1, type 1. Reformer, perfectionist, the person who, again, is concerned with the environment, not happy with the way things are going, and rather than take that very assertive 8 view, or the way the 9 approaches it, they will try to basically show that there's a proper way. If we could just all get with the program, That's where that perfectionism comes from. If there's a right way to do it, and if everyone would just get on with the program, it would just bring stability to the environment. And so they're very specific, very detailed, and that's valuable. If you're working on a project or some activity and you need that kind of precision, they've got a really great gift there. Again, what could happen, and they have to be aware of it, is if they overdo it because they're driven for that kind of that perfection, that could be tough to interact with somebody like that who's never, it's never good enough, and then they can very easily judge other people if you're not meeting that standard. So there's and they have this sense that that it's never good enough, and so they're constantly working towards trying to be perfect and to achieve that standard, basically for the sense that that's how if we all would to live a life like that, it would bring stability into their environment and the folks that are around them. So I have friends that are in this type, and what they'll say is that as they come to an awareness of how strong this drive is, they'll try and dial it down for the people that are around them that care about. So the standard isn't quite as high for those as it might be for themselves, inwardly. So, but very principled, and they're sometimes referred to as a reformer because they're really trying to achieve, if things need to be fixed, they're the ones striving for, there's got to be a better way, and we should strive to achieve it. So that's the three in the gut center. So I think we went through. So I think we got a little bit of time for some Q&A. Hopefully, if we could help, Megan and I can help you with some.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna stop your screen. Is that good? So we could see more of the room?
Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So friends, what we were gonna do is open up the room a little bit, and there were a couple of questions, but if anybody had one that they wanted to ask, it's a great presentation and a lot to take in. Let's see, here I was going to do this. I thought this would open up the room. Let's see. Nope.
So we have a question about the wings.
Yes.
So the wings are whatever primary type you are, it's the number on the right and the left of you. Most of us gravitate or identify with one stronger than the other, not type 1, just a specific type, one or the other. So if you're a type 8, your wings would be a 9 and a 7. If you're a type 3, your wings would be a 2 and a 4. So really, we're like a blend of the two. We call them cousins of each other. So like I'm a type 7, but my wing is a 6. I identify more with a 6 type than I do an 8, which is that challenger. Lou, do you want to add anything to the wings?
Yeah, no, it's I think many, like Megan said, many folks lean one way, it's kind of good to explore. It's, once you find your own type and you're working through that kind of awareness, it's kind of nice to explore the one that's near you, and because the whole goal of this is to learn how to live within your own skin, and kind of expand outward, right, in some of these other types, and grow and gain some strength from those as well. Right.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions that was asked early on was, what would help us to know our type? We might have identified as you were going through, where you said, oh, that sounds like me, but what do you think would be most helpful?
So let me just start by saying, at the end, we're going to provide some resources, both in book form and an app, and a couple of on a website where you can get there's some tests that are out there, surveys, and some are a little more extensive than others. It would be good to do a little bit of reading, and even some of these tests would give you some indication. I think ultimately you've got to work it a little bit, because it's only as good as you're answering it, right? And So I think that's an effective way to gain some insight into what your type. It's probably one of the most important things is try and experiment and try and find the skin that you feel most connected to.
And the tests are only, like a exploration exercise. And I would say, from Lou and I's experience, the test taking is good, but you really have to go into the test thinking not how you want to appear to others. It's really having like integrity and being honest with yourself about how your thought process is, or like what motivates you. So you're usually presented with two options that you have to choose, and it's how you operate most of the time, not oh, but this one time I did this. It's most of the time and how you operate internally, not your self-image of what you project into the world in public.
So there's a question. Yeah, there's a question here. It says, are there exercises that help identify the type one falls into? And I think that's what you're talking about, the testing. But having taken the test, I think exactly what you said, it is difficult to be honest with, wait, I think this is how I am. But if someone else were to look at it, they may say, well, no, not at all. Is there any benefit to helping someone else look at it with you, or, and help you kind of be real?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think perspectives from other people is very valuable, but ultimately any good coach would tell you they might have their sense of what they think your type is, but a good coach would say you need to work that for yourself, because you know best if you're honest, and that's the work that you have to get into. Someone would say too is if you find a particular type when you're reading it and some of the shadow side, it really kind of gets at you like, ooh, God, that hurt. That, like, somebody knows me better than I want to even let anybody else know. That's probably some insight that's worth paying attention to, yeah. And that's, so that's that, self-honesty that you have to, explore.
Right.
Embrace. Yeah. Some people cross into one tribe, not just occasionally, but on a regular basis? You want to answer?
Let me just give you an example. Like Megan and I are close friends, and we became business associates and then started close friends. One of the things I was aware of, like I'm coming from the heart too, right? So I wear it on my sleeve. We could joke about it, right? And I know she's operating in the head center. What I've been able to watch in the way she operates in a stress situation, something pops up that you didn't plan, I'll react immediately, almost like, they think negatively of me, or, it's like you start getting into this like me-centered reaction. Right. Yeah. And I don't even have a lot of information. I just have maybe an email, right? So I'll look from a head person, like, that head tribe. Megan will not react until she gets a hell of a lot more information. Right. And that's important for somebody that's a heart center to learn to, like, before you fire off the reaction, get a little more data, right? Just pull a little more data. So it allows me to create a pause, gain a little more information. And what I learn a lot of times is that first reaction wasn't even warranted, because I've got a little more. So that's where she's helped me a great deal. And that's, I think, the expansive potential. I'll never be operating out of the head, but I can stretch those muscles a little bit, and it'll help me a great deal.
Right. So the bottom line, I think, is we don't go into one tribe or another. Like we're a primary tribe. You can go into a stress and a like growth center, which we didn't go into it, but I just pointed it out on those PowerPoints. Those can cross tribes, but your primary tribe is your primary tribe. I mean, you can go into others, but it's still your primary. And Deborah wants to know if we have a website, Lou. I have a website, and Lou can be reached, or or we could, through me. So my website is soul-transformed.com. I'll type it into the field, but Lou and I both can help with training. We've both taken some coursework for coaching, identifications, helping, figure out like what type you are, but not only type, but like where you fall into those patterns of maybe of undesirable behaviors and your awareness of them. And, we talk about self-awareness, but really it starts with self-observation. You have to be able to like be honest with yourself and not just kind of go through, these reading materials. If you explore more, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of resources out there. You really have to be honest with yourself and embrace the good and the bad together. Because it's balanced, it's dualistic, but we're all in the middle.
So I have a question. As I live with my own type, one of the things I'm noticing, and I'm just curious if this rings true, the people that I get most frustrated with are the place where I go to with my stress, the number, that is my stress point, and the people who reflect back to me my own type in a way that's like not healthy. And then the people that I admire the most are those where I go in my growth area and my kind of like the healthy impulse. That's actually helped confirm for me that I'm kind of living in the right space with my type. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So Mark, you're saying that the things that bother you most about other people is really your shadow side.
Well, my shadow, yes, and then the 8,
like
the opposite.
The worst version of yourself is what bothers you about other people, and I think that's a great indication, right? Like, why does it bother you so much? Because that's what you don't like about or appreciate about yourself.
Yes.
And then on the flip side, it's you admire other people for your strengths and your growth. Yeah. Lou, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think when you find those types that are mirrors of yourself, I mean that is a good validation that the work is important. And I think if you do the work yourself, because sometimes when the mirror reflection's coming up, you could take it out on that person, in an interaction, and better. It's probably a healthier way to just to do the inner work.
It's a really great opportunity to have compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you don't like about other people, and then you have a realization that maybe those are the things that you don't like about yourself, is really an invitation to have compassion for not only the people that are, maybe annoying you or rubbing you the wrong way, but it's really about self-compassion and accepting yourself, for your whole person, not just parts of it that you like.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I just want to make this point. Without this kind of a tool or something along this line, there's a tendency to overly personalize these interactions that we have with people, especially the ones that are irritating, and we personalize it. And that's what we found in hospice. What was happening in these clinical teams is people were personalizing these friction points, these personality friction points, and it was becoming, problematic for the team's effectiveness too. And so that's, I think, that's another opportunity as to why it would be worth, doing the work, just to try and tone that down and realize
So are you saying that then in the work environment, you found that as each individual person on the team understood where they were coming from, it helped the interactions with all of you?
Yeah, let me give you a perfect example, Liz. It's a really good question. When Megan and I got together, the head of social services said, guys, if you can put an Enneagram workshop together, we could actually train the clinical teams in this. So Megan and I, there was a social worker, two social workers, right? And one was, kind of interested. So the four of us got together. Well, it just so happened that we had a couple of sessions, right? Work sessions. And Megan, being the 7, tremendously optimistic, come in with all these great ideas. One of the social workers would start to analyze each idea from a risk perspective. Imagine like what that feels like. So to the point where we had 2 sessions and she was ready to just like, Lou, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I could see her. And then we clicked. The social worker was a type 5 in her tribe, a head person, but the flip side, remember? The risk assessor, right? I mean, she was a tax lawyer before she became a hospice social worker. So
Right.
we laughed. We got together. We laughed. We basically just brought it out. We said, God, guys, we're living this like right now. And it definitely helped, Megan, right? Because now we had a language. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I'm like a I just want to plow through the progress, get everything done in the session that we have, and I don't need any dead weight with us. And that dead weight is the whole poker. I mean, give me a break, move on. We got to keep moving, and so you have Lou and the other social worker was actually a 2, and they were kind of like, they had to mediate basically because I want as much done as we can do in 60 minutes, and we're going to move on to the next. We can look back later, but yes, of course, that's all, that's the balancing act. That's like stopping and appreciating. Oh, well, she has real concerns. She's not doing it to slow us down. She's not sabotaging us. She's not doing it, because it's about her. She's doing it because we need that balance of all different types to make a whole product or have a whole outcome or have a whole relationship, however you want to say it. If it's a personal relationship or business, we can definitely all complement each other, and we don't have to have friction, and we don't have to personalize things. It's a choice of how we react.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And one of the comments I wanted to just share so everybody hears that she was saying she believes that most people are more than one individual type. And I do think that is true, that we probably, as you went through, we were identifying with things. And you might be strongest in one area. Now, this is also spoken like a 9, which I am because I can see all perspectives, but I do think that maybe she's a 9 who who said that, but I do think that you probably recognize tendencies in all. And I think there is truth to that.
Everyone touches at least 5 types. Your primary, then you have your wings, which are 2 more, and then you have your area of growth, which is 1 more, and your area of disintegration. So really you're like more than half of the whole Enneagram as a whole, but not all the time.
Right. And somebody was then asking, could you change through your life? But maybe you become more aware of who you are, and you're a little more honest about how you take the test. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're gonna, in different settings as you get older and you're in different environments, you're kind of almost like forced to take on some of the different characteristics of some of the other types. I mean, it's just to succeed, and but it may not be your core strength. You've got to kind of like expand into that just to achieve whatever it is you need to achieve. So, but I think where it really becomes very apparent is if you're in a stress moment, you probably relegate back to your core, because that's kind of where your anchor is, and that's probably some insight too. Like when you start doing some of that shadow irritation, it's probably operating out of the center that you're.
But you do not change centers or types. If you find yourself changing, it means that you were mistyped.
Yeah.
Or that you identified with the wrong type.
I think this is a better way to look at it. Is Russ Hudson would say, he's one of the kind of the gurus in this, that you start with your type because that's the one you know the best, and if you're honest, that's where your Achilles heels are. So best to start with the one you know, and work that, because if you can get that to a point where you're operating at a much healthier, you don't have the ego triggers happening as quickly, then you could kind of stretch those other muscles, like the body, the gut muscle, if you're like me, or the head. Because really what I think with all of this tool, you're really trying to operate and, all right, if you were born into the heart tribe, I have a mind, I have a body. And if I could access those other 3 ways of intelligence, those other 2 intelligence centers, I'm operating in a much more integrated way. I'm seeing reality in a much more integrated way, and that's a good place to move towards. So that's the other, I think, the value point.
Donna has a follow-up question. Do you think life experience don't you think life experiences can change your type?
Yeah, I think it could change it. I don't know if it can change it, but it can, I think it definitely, life experience and the way you approach life experiences can provide you the opportunity to operate and move towards a much healthier level, way of being the type you are and the center you are. You know, if I could tell you, like, if I can work towards having less of these like emotional triggers happen quickly, and I use life experiences to make mistakes and look at them and observe them and say, you know, how could I have done that a little differently in the future, because I can't really relive the past. So I think life experience does provide you the opportunity for growth.
But there's levels of health for each type. So there's 9 or 10 levels of health. So you would be operating in the same type, but going up and down on the levels of health, which would be, you know, your life experiences, depending on what they are. And they could look very different, the levels of health, even within the same type.
Yeah. And I think that's a good question, because, like, as I was saying earlier, like, Megan operates in a much more thinking approach. I mean, I try to mimic, I try to find whichever way I can incorporate that in. It won't come natural, but I can stretch those muscles and have those work for me. It just, my reaction to a situation is a lot more fuller and more effective. I mean, I've seen it. So that's an example, I think, of where you could start to stretch into you know, the head center of intelligence, or the body center.
Anything else?
So I think we're at 8:35, so it's time for us to say goodnight, and thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Lou, for just this appetizer of what we could possibly begin to delve into. Megan, I love that you talk about the interconnectedness, and if this doesn't show how we're interconnected, I'm not sure what else does.
Right.